Hey guys, welcome to Warhammer Stuff. So today we have 2,000 points of Arks of Omen, the Ynnari versus the Flesh Terrors. So let's go ahead and check out the armies.
Alright, so for today, I have almost 2,000 points of Flesh Terrors. The new points changes have made it actually a little bit difficult to get to exactly 2,000 because now it's a little bit like Age of Sigmar. These are all blocks of troops, so finding perfectly fitting blocks is a bit difficult. But for my Warlord of Flesh Terrors, I have Gabriel Seth in all his goodness. He's my Chapter Master, as Lord of Swaller, Whirlwind of Gore, Iron Halo. Yeah, he moves forward, hits hard, hits very hard, and hits often. And he fights twice in the fight phase if there's still people there. And a Chaplain and Terminator armor. So I wanted to try out their unique relic item, which is the Crimson Plate. It gives him +1 movement. I can charge in a turn which he advanced, and I can move up to 4 inches when making pylons. I thought that was cool. And because he's a chaplain, he has AoE buffs, I thought that this fast movement would go well with him, despite him only having 3 attacks. He has the Canticle of Hate, he has the Mantra of Strength and the Crimson Plate. Canticle of Hate and Mantra of Strength. So he can empower himself, give him extra strength and attack, and he can give +2 to charge to people around him and stuff. And can move up to an extra 3 inches. So he's a buffer, he's pretty strong, and he can fight himself pretty well. So, and I gave him the Gift of Foresight and Warlord trait, so he gets to reroll a hit, wound, and saving throw per turn. So, pretty tough. Then for my only troops, Infiltrators, to protect the backline. If my army is all going forward, I need someone to hold the backline. They're only 100 points now, and I gave them the Helix Gauntlet. So, pretty strong. Now on to Elites, which is the Arks of Omen Compulsory. So I have a unit of 7 Thunderhammer and Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminators. I have, because I wanted to try it, 2 Death Company Dreadnoughts. And with all the points saved from all the stuff, I put all of that into Dreadnought Drop Pods, because I wanted to try it. Yeah. Then for fast attack, so I would have gone Vanguard Veterans, but these guys have some special stuff, so for every 1 in 5, guys, I can get an Eviscerator, which is sort of like a Power Fist, but it has 1 more AP. So pretty strong weapon. So there's 2 in each. The Sergeant has an Inferno pistol, which is basically a 6-inch melta-gun. So 2 squads of them. Then for heavy support, a squad of Devastators. Now, ignore that extra melta-gun. Basically, this guy's just a regular Sergeant. I had a mistake when I was building the army in the game. So these guys do not have plasmas, they actually have grav guns because I could not find the grav gun thing. So everyone with the plasma cannon is actually a grav gun and a melta-gun, which you still have to pay points for, but I tried to fill out the points because of that huge gap then. I had 30 or 40 points at the end that was empty, so just gave them multi-meltas. So they have the Signum and Armorium Cherub, very nice. And so the only difference is the sergeants each have a melta-gun. One guy just has a bolter, that'll be the second one. And each squad has 1 multi-melta and 3 grav guns. And then for each of them, they each have a drop pod, which if you drop it, plays that noise. Pretty cool. And 1 Land Raider Crusader, which also got buffed because all of its guns and stuff is free, so he's cheaper now. And this is almost 2,000 points of Flesh Terrors.
Alright, you guys, so I have 2,000 points of Ynnari. I technically only have 1999 points, so I'm 1 point short. But anyway, so the Ynnari are interesting because they take all of the Eldari factions and they kind of merge them together into a mega faction. Now, they play as a Craft Worlds army, so that means stratagems and, craft worldy stuff. So specific rules. And so they don't take any, for instance, like the Drukhari stratagems or anything like that, as far as I'm aware and as far as I can tell. Or I think Harlequins, because they technically can play in both armies naturally, so I think they can still do it. So I was trying to figure out what to do. So I think this is a legal Ynnari army because I have to have 1-to-1 for each slot. So for every Drukhari or Harlequin unit I take, I have to take 1 in the same slot from a Craft World unit. So we'll see. I decided to take all of the Ynnari HQs because I wanted to try and give them all a go and see what happens. And so I started off with Yvraine. She's my warlord. So she has the Gaze of Ynnad and the Word of the Phoenix psychic powers. And then I gave her the Ynnari warlord trait, which is Warden of Souls. So she regains 1 lost wound. And if she's in engagement range with a unit below its starting strength, she gains an additional strength and attack characteristic. Then I have the Incarn, who looks like he has all of the psychic powers from the Revenant Discipline, which is pretty cool. And he's also able to teleport in when a unit dies. He basically just pops up where that is, whether he starts in reserves or on the table. He just shows up. He can only do it once, but that's still pretty cool, I think. And then I have the Vizark, and he's kind of on the just chop you in the face kind of way. So he's just like a champion or oh, that's really it. And so yeah, we'll see what he does. And then as far as regular kind of Eldar units go, or Eldari, I took a Farseer on a Skyrunner. Now this one has Ancestor's Grace and Shield of Ynnad. So she basically can fly around and buff. Now she has a Warlord trait and a Relic. So the Relic is Sunstorm, so it's a bike with a 20-inch move and objective secured. And then her Warlord trait is Fate's Messenger. So once per turn, when a saving throw, so it doesn't say the first one, it just says when a saving throw is failed, I change the damage characteristic of that attack to 0. So that could be potentially really useful. Or maybe not, who knows. So, and that's it for my HQs. So moving into, or technically actually the Vizark, if I take Yvraine, doesn't take up an org chart. So I could have had another HQ, but not important. So moving on to troops, I have a couple of things here. So one, I have a kitted out squad of 5 Harlequins. And so there's 2 fusion pistols in here. There is 1 of each of their unique weapons. So there's a Harlequin's Embrace, there is a Harlequin's Kiss, and there is the other one. What is it called? Harlequin's Caress. So there's Harlequin specific stratagems for each of those. I figured I'd have 1 of each in there and see what happens. Then I have a squad of 10 Guardians with a Star Cannon weapons platform. And that's it. They're just Guardians with a platform. And 2 squads of 5 Rangers. Rangers are pretty cheap. They're a squad of 5. They're kind of hard to move out of terrain and objectives if they can sit down in them. So I figured I'd give them a go. I think it's 120 points or something like that for both squads. So that's not bad as far as Eldar go. And that is it for my troops. So moving into elites, I have 3 squads here. So I have a squad of 5 Howling Banshees. And so the Exarch has the Executioner. And I gave them the upgrade to Graceful Avoidance, which in combat means they have a 4-up invuln. And so they have a bunch of stuff naturally, but now they have a 4-up invuln in combat. And that really buffs the Exarch up quite a bit as well, because then she gets +1 attack. She gets an extra wound, so I think they start off with 2, so she technically has 3 wounds, which is pretty cool. And then moving over to the Dire Avengers, it's a squad of 10. And then I have the Exarch with the dual Avenger Shuriken catapults, as well as, I believe it's Shredding Fire. I can't remember which one is the upgraded one. But so each time they make a ranged attack on a 5-up, they proc the Shuriken AP boost. So unmodified wounds of 5-up add like 2 AP to their guns or something like that. And so I'll see if that actually matters. But hopefully, because I play off of starting strength, I had slightly bigger squads as opposed to a bunch of really smaller squads, and we'll see if that actually matters. And then I have a squad of Incubi. I think it's a squad of 7. And they have a Clavex with a Demiclave, just for the options there, because he can still swing like a regular one, or he can split it to multiple attacks if that's what's happening. Incubi, whenever I play Drukhari, are really one of the few things that work well for me. Now they don't have a transport this time because I didn't want to pay for it, but so we'll see what happens there. And that's it for my elites. So again, I had at least 1 Craft World unit, and then I had a Drukhari unit. And so same in fast attacks, you see it, I have one Craft World and then one Drukhari, so I have a squad of Warp Spiders. Now the Exarch, now I don't know exactly why I did this, but I gave him the relic for the Warp Spiders, which is basically extra damage power blades. So I'll give him +2 strength, AP4, 2 damage, unless it's a wound roll of 6, in which case it's 3 damage. And then I gave them the upgrade for Surprise Assault, which basically means when they do show up that turn, all their guns get an additional shot. And so it's a lot of shooting. So we'll see. And then I have the Scourges. Now there's four of them have Dark Lances. So this is just a heavy weapons team just flying around, hopefully shooting stuff. It's convenient because he took a lot of vehicles and dreadnoughts, so hopefully they will be useful. But we'll see. And that's my fast attacks. And then moving into my heavy supports, I have a Falcon, which can transport 6 models, which it will. Well, only 5, but still. I gave it a Bright Lance, and it has a Pulse Laser naturally. And I added Star Engines to it, which give it a +3 to its move. So it has a 19-inch move. And then just a regular Falcon after that. And then the Void Weaver. So again, you find that 1/1. And this has the Haywire Cannon, and that's it. It has the Haywire Cannon. And that is just under 2,000 points of Ynnari.
Alright, so for today, we are doing Mission 3-2, Direct Assault. It is Control 1, Control 2, Control More, and it has the modifier that if your unit has OBSEC, the objectives are sticky, so if they take, if an OBSEC unit takes an objective, they can move off and it'll still be counted as yours. Then, you gain 2 victory points per turn, or 3 if you complete both of these objectives. You complete one, you get 2. So the first thing is if you control every objective on the battlefield, or you at least control one objective marker you did not control at the start of your turn. And the other objective is they destroyed at least one enemy unit that was in range of an objective marker at the start of their turn. So do both of those and you get 3 points. Do one and you get 2 points. And that is the mission. Alright, so for Secondaries, for the Blood Angels, Relentless Assault, which is their own type, which is basically behind enemy lines, but basically it's like I have to have more guys in his deployment than he has in my deployment, and I get 4 points for that. Then we have Assassination. He has 4 characters, so go figure. And then Grind Them Down. Oh wait, one thing to say about the Assassination. Since it's the new one, if a troop does it, succeeds in killing a character, I get a command point. Grind Them Down. Pretty self-explanatory. His guys have the armor of paper mache, so I think I have a chance at that, but Armor of Contempt is long gone, so we'll see how that goes. And those are my Flesh Terror Secondaries.
So, mine are all Eldari or Asuriani. I don't know, there's so many names for them now. Objectives. So, Wrath of Cain, starting off, basically I get a point for every unit killed by a range attack and a melee attack. And if I do both of those in the same turn, ranged and melee, I get 2 extra points. I'll have to figure that out. It just says score 2 victory points of both of the above, so maybe that's a total of 4 in that round. I'm not sure. Anyway, and then scout the enemy. So basically, it's an objective, and you can start deployment action at the end of your movement phase if it's not within 6 inches of the deployment zone. So basically, outside of my deployment zone, I can do this scout thing that gives me either 2 points if I'm not in his deployment zone, or 4 points if I am in his deployment zone. So we'll see what happens there. And then the final one is Scry Futures, which is a Psyker thing. So it's a warp charge of 4. And basically, within an objective marker, they do it, and it's a psychic action for 3 points. So that's pretty easy as well, I think. So I think most of these are pretty easy for me to do. But we will see.
Alright, so for deployment, we may have noticed that there is a clock next to us. These games take a little bit too long, so we're going to try to speed things up by having like a chess timer clock there. An hour
5 hours.
Yeah, 5 hours because of you. So an hour and a half essentially of all gameplay. So for deployment, it starts there as while we're deploying. So we don't have an actual chess clock. There is one created in this game map, but I can't figure out how to rig it for our specific desires. So essentially what happens is, first my Land Raider goes up because he's such a big guy. He needs to be able to have all the space to go places. And Gabriel, Seth, and the Terminators are inside there. And then apart from that, I barely have anyone else. Everyone's in the drop pods, and because drop pods don't allow me to get screwed by the limit of how many guys I can have up in reserves, I can have very few guys on the board. So essentially what happens is I block the back with my infiltrators. I only have one. I was thinking of having two, but I decided against it. And the basically the assault squads are each on the right and left sides to be able to push out. The bottom right one has the chaplain next to it. I would have put him next to the Land Raider, but I do know that his stupid Rangers would be able to ignore the Land Raider protecting him and just snipe him. And so I put him in a place where he's really safe right now, and we will see as things go what to do with him. And that's basically it. I have a very sparse thing hiding behind cover, trying to cover my spots and being ready to move out. And that's essentially what my deployment was. I didn't care where my opponent was, essentially.
Yeah, so for me, I have a lot of kind of mobility, and so I also have some things in Deep Strike this time, or whatever it's called, reserves. But my Rangers were able to kind of deploy anywhere on the board, and so I was like, well, let me try, putting them out a little bit farther on the edges to kind of maybe do some first turn stuff, or I don't know, I haven't really decided yet. So they were kind of got spread out onto the sides. They're cheap, so it doesn't necessarily matter what happens to them. And then after that, let me think. I basically was trying to spread out a little bit to kind of help catch stuff on the sides. So my Farseer ended up in the middle just because it's on a 20-inch bike, so it doesn't matter really where he's at. But also allow him to do my secondary on the home objective for now. And then, I spread out the Vizark with the Incubi and Ukraine with the Harlequins, for better or worse. And then my Dire Avengers are up at the top as my Scourges are down at the bottom, or vice versa for you guys. And then my Void Weaver, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it, so I just kept it a little farther back. But again, it flies quite far, so it doesn't necessarily matter either what it does. And that was kind of my deployment, just kind of space things out and give myself room to move, because I can. And that was it.
All right. So who should go first? Who should go second? I'll start off. Basically, if I go first, these Rangers are dead without them being able to do anything. From different causes. These Rangers are very close to this flying unit, Space Marines. This unit will not get hit by them, probably. And so this is more of me just playing it safe. So if I get the first turn, I'm taking these two objectives guaranteed. I am more than likely, this unit of Rangers is dead. This unit of Rangers might be dead. Probably not, but it depends. I won't have much of the board. The center is still like, I don't know fully where to go yet. That's what I expect. If I get the first turn, I'm going to do a lot of damage quickly. If I go second, I'm going to take some hits, but I'm going to have better targets because I don't know where to send my Land Raider. I have no idea currently where he needs to go. So that's currently my problem with that. So if you go first, my Land Raider will have his target, and I'll take some hits. And I will be a little bit hemmed in with my deep strikes, but I will be able to I'll be able to manage. So that's what I think. So what about you?
Yeah, so if I go first, I'll be able to do some secondaries right off from the bat. And it'll allow me to kind of move around a little bit and reposition some stuff. Mm-hmm. And then if I go second, it'll definitely allow me to respond a little bit better. So I don't know if it matters so much to me, because my units are fragile, so I can't just run them around in the open.
Mm-hmm.
At least that is what I'm telling myself, because if not, I will probably end up doing that just because. But so I have to be a little bit more responsive here, I think, and do kind of like the hide and the sneak stuff, and then shoot from corners and stuff. So I think it doesn't matter so much to me whether I go first or second.
All right then. Well, let's see what it is. I want to go first though, also because it's be cooler that way for deep strikes. I need a 5.
Looks like it's Ynnari.
I never get to go first. All right.
You went first last time.
No, I didn't. You were.
All right, you guys. So for movement, we had a small computer error and we were unable to catch what had happened. But here's what had happened. So what had happened was my Scourges moved up just to the edge of the building. They don't really need to move very far, at least right now. As did my Harlequin troop and Yvrain. So they just kind of scooted up, not really trying to do anything too crazy just yet. My Guardian Defenders and my Farseer just stayed put. My Void Weaver, however, scooted out a little bit to the left, just to kind of catch an angle on really anything. I don't know if it will, but... and then, moving over, my Red Ranger stayed still, both of my Rangers did, but my Incubi, Vizark, and Dire Avengers all ran, and I rolled a 5 3 times in a row, which is impressive. And so they were able to get just shy of the objective, but they were also able to just, you know, get a little farther up the board. There's really nothing else on the board right now, so it kind of just... they're just kind of moving around, getting positions for stuff. And then my green squad did the mission, or not mission secondary, my secondary, which was scout the enemy. And that'll be done because they're rangers at the end of my turn, so he has no way to interrupt it, which is a nifty 2 points for me. And that was the movement phase. All right, you guys. So for my psychic phase, it was relatively simple. My Farseer did my mission secondary Scry Futures on my home objective. It was just an easy one to do. And then he also gave the Guardians a 4-up invuln with the Revenant Discipline's Shield of Ynnari. Now, I'm pretty sure because he can do two spells a phase, that one can be an objective and one cannot, but I'm not 100% sure. So if that's wrong, just let me know. But yeah, and then no one else really could do anything. Yvrain's powers are all aggressive, and then the Incarnate isn't on the field, so he can't do anything. And so that was my psychic phase. All right, you guys. So for shooting, it was actually pretty good. My Scourges shot at his Land Raider through the terrain, so they were -1, and obviously he had the light cover, whatever. But so 2 went through actually, because he needed 5s because they're -4, the Dark Lances. And I was able to do 10 damage with those 2 Scourges because it's D3 plus 3 damage, which is nice. Bringing him down to 6, and then plot twist, my Rangers shot at it because they have the Mortal Wound proc on 6s to wound, which would have been what they needed anyway to wound because their gun is strength 4. And they actually got 2 6s, so it did 2 mortal wounds. And then he passed both of the saves because it's a tank. And yeah, so I actually brought the Land Raider for the first time ever so quickly down to 4 wounds in 1 round of shooting. So that was nice. We will see what happens next though. All right, you guys. So for secondaries, I didn't actually step onto another objective, so I wasn't able to get the mission secondary. Nor Wrath of Cain because I didn't kill anything. But I was able to get 2 points for Scout the Enemy because I did it not in his deployment zone. And then Scry Futures I got 3 points for with my Farseer. And so I got a total of 5 secondary points, which is okay for a first turn.
Alright, so for movement phase, Land Raider's dead. So it can't really move anywhere, so sadly. So, Space Marines up top flew up to the Rangers up there, and then after that, then my Space Marines on the bottom, Jetpack, moved forward a little bit after debating like where to do. Then my Terminators came out of the Land Raider, and so did Gabriel Seth. They all ran. They ran actually pretty far. They got into the center objective. My Infiltrators moved around. They ended up all within 6 inches of their original places and stuff, so whatever they're holding the back objective. At the beginning of the command phase, the chaplain passed Litany Canticles of Hate on the Space Marines, but he did not empower himself. And then after that, drop pods came in. I was only able to bring in 3 of them because I couldn't find space for a 4th one. So Devastators came in the center. So they got the center, and they're on the oil slick, and they got line of sight towards a lot of his vehicle, or his anti-tank stuff. Then the other Devastator squad dropped near the bottom right. I could not drop on the objective, but I could get close, and so they're a bit of a distance away. They're pretty well guarded, and then a Dreadnought dropped right next to them as well, and we will see how that goes. And yeah, that is my... that's all my movement. Alright, so for the shooting phase, I started with the top. The Space Marines up top, the jump pack troopers shooting at the Rangers. The sergeant fired first. He had an Inferno pistol, which is basically a 6-inch multi-melta, killed one. The rest of his guys mag dumped them, and they successfully killed another. Then at the bottom, it was actually kind of a difficult choice to figure out where to shoot, because there's a lot of forces there, but I gotta play it safe. So I focused on the Incubi, and so I had all the Devastators fire at them. So I had the Signum guy. Basically, I can select one of my guys once per game and have him fire twice, and I can make him so that they hit on or have a ballistic skill of 2. So now, because I came out of the drop pod, I count as moving. I could pay 2 CP to have them count as stationary, but I'm not doing that. And so basically, he was hitting on 3s, and then he rolled tons of 2s. And so, yeah, so slowly I whittled them down. Then the multi-melta went in. I spent 1 CP to re-roll the melta shot hit. I needed 4s, hit, and slaughtered a bunch of them. The bolter guy fired, did nothing. Then the Death Company Dreadnought has a melta gun, 12-inch, and a heavy flamer, and fired all his shots into there and was able to kill 1 guy. And so the Devastators killed 8, Dreadnought killed 1, so all that's left is their Clavex Sergeant. Not the best. Then on the middle, Land Raider Crusader tried to get vengeance on those guys, and because he was shooting through the oil slick, his ballistic skill is now 5 because of his wounds, so he's hitting on 6s. And he barely hit anything. But that assault cannon, though, a lot of 6s happened, and he was able to kill 2 guys in total. Then the Devastator Marines that took the center, mag dumped them. I had also the Signum guy have one of my gravity guns fire twice on ballistic skill 2, and he rolled tons of 2s again. Whatever. But they were able to completely wipe out the squad with the grav guns before the multi-melta went up. And that was my shooting phase. Alright, so for the charge phase, the jump pack troopers on top charge. They rolled terrible, and he has this item that is -2 to charge him, so I just barely made it in. And he had a thing that on a 2-up, he does D3 mortal wounds. He got a 2-up, and he did 3 mortal wounds to me, so he killed 1 and did 1 wound to 1. So, and then on the bottom, my Death Company Dreadnought tried to charge the Clavex, failed the 9. I spent a CP2 reroll, failed that, and that was my charge phase. Alright, so for the fight phase, my Space Marines basically just beat the Rangers into paste, and then when they die, the Yin Karn shows up out of engagement range, and I'm not going to consolidate into him. And that is the end of my fight phase. Alright, the end of my turn for Secondaries. Relentless Assault, I have no one in his back line yet. Assassination, killed no one. Grind them down. I killed 2 of his units, he did not kill any of mine. And I do not have Death and Zeal, so we'll see how that goes. And that is the end of my turn.
All right, you guys. So for movement, some things that happened. So my Farseer Skyrunner popped all the way over down towards the top middle, or up towards the top middle. My Harlequin troop and Ivrain ran out to get, that way. Towards his Space Marines over there. I can't remember what they're called. The
Jump pack troopers, assault troops.
Yeah, there you go. My Void Weaver popped out to start chipping away at his Dreadnoughts. Hopefully they'll kill it, but crazier things have happened. And then my Ranger stayed still, but the Clavex actually failed his morale check. We forgot to do it at the tail end of the last turn. We remembered mid-movement phase. So the Dire Rangers moved up, and the Vizark just kind of moved within heroic intervention range, essentially. And then that was the majority of my movement, but then end of movement, my reinforcements came in. So my warp spiders came off all the way at the side, on the, I guess it would be the left-hand side for you guys. And then my falcon actually came in on the bottom right corner, really just to kind of try and deal with some of the heavier stuff going on down there. And yeah, that was my movement phase. All right, you guys. So in this psychic phase, my Farseer Skyrunner tried to give Ancestor's Grace to my Harlequins. She failed. I rolled like I don't know, it was like a 5. It was embarrassing. And then she tried to smite his Devastators, and she failed. She rolled a 3. Then Ivrain went, and she did Gaze of Ynnari, but she only ended up doing 1 mortal wound, which was garbage. So she got the D3, and then I rolled a 1. Or I rolled a 2, but with 1. And then she tried to smite the Space Marines over here. She did 1 mortal wound, so I finished off that one guy from last turn. Then the Incarn basically did Unbind Souls on them, so anyone who fights them in melee, 6s to hit auto wound. And then he tried to smite them as well. He got the Super Smite, and he actually rolled a 4, so he got them. So that was nice. And that was the psychic phase. Alright, you guys, so for the shooting phase, I start off with my warp spiders against his infiltrators. Now, I realized as I was starting to shoot that they only have 12-inch range, which I feel like it used to be 18 inches, but whatever. So I readjusted them a little bit from the deep strike, because obviously they deep striked to shoot. So even still, only 3 were able to get in and shoot. Now they ended up doing 6 wounds through. So they killed 3 out of the 5 infiltrators there. Then the Incarn shot at his Space Marines here. The what are they called again?
Assault troops, assault jump packs.
The Assault Marines. That's right, the jump pack, you guys. On the top left, I think he did 1 damage. Yeah. It was quite pathetic, because he basically has a 6-inch flamer thing. And then the Harlequins, actually they didn't shoot because they're, oh no, they did. They shot their pistols. I think they actually did a wound somewhere. I'm not 100% sure. But then they didn't battle focus move, because if they battle focus, they're unable to charge. Ivrain did battle focus move though, because she doesn't have a gun, so. Then my Farseer shot at his Devastators. They actually killed off 1 guy, and then he battle focused just into the terrain, so he couldn't get shot. Then the Void Weaver shot at his Dreadnought drop pod, doing 2 wounds, which was 6 damage. And then my Guardians heavy platform tried to shoot at the Terminators, and they failed because they just missed everything. And then the Falcon tried to take out the Dreadnought, but it only ended up doing 3 damage due to actually a really lucky save on his part. He probably would have died, but anyway, not important. Kind of important. Then the Rangers can't shoot. I was going to try and Hail Mary them, but they're doing an objective, so they can't. And then the Dire Avengers shot at his Devastators, clearing them off, and then they battle focused just a little bit onto the objective just to touch it. So that way I can get secondary points. And that was the shooting phase. Alright, you guys, so it's pretty depressing as far as my turn charges go. The Harlequins were going to charge. Now, they used to have a thing that ignored terrain when they were moving, so they were never affected by it. They apparently don't have that anymore. However, so they failed their first charge by like 2 inches. And so I use a command point to re-roll it, and then I use one of my dice, my fate dice, to give an auto 6 in there. So I needed like a 3 to make the charge, and then I rolled a 1. So the Harlequins just failed. It was very sad. So the Incarn charged in, and we'll hope he can do what they could not. And then that was actually it for my charges. I'm not gonna instigate against that Dreadnought just yet. And yeah, so kind of a lackluster charge phase. Alright, you guys, so for the fight phase, the Incarn, so I had 2 options, one for double the attacks and then one for just if they get hit with it, they die, which is the one that I chose. And so 3 went through, so 3 made it all the way through. So I missed 1 on the hit and 2 on the wound, because I only needed 2s, but you know, those pesky ones, there's always at least 1 of them. And so 3 just straight up took it. And then he swung back. His regular guy got 1 through, but I saved the actual save for it. And then his eviscerator swung, but unfortunately, because of the -1, they missed all of their shot, like all of the attacks. It was very emotionally devastating, I'm sure. And that was the fight phase. Kind of a lot of nothing.
Alright, so for the morale phase, it was terrible. My infiltrators failed, lost 1. My eviscerators up top failed and ran. So I only have 1, the sergeant left. Not that good.
Alright, you guys, so for points, I only had 1 primary starting off, which was not ideal, but it is what it is. Death and Zeal, I did get 2 points because I was able to basically take the bottom right corner objective. Not that anyone had it, but, you know, I was able to claim it, so... and then I got 1 point in Wrath of Cain for killing a unit with ranged attack. And then Scout the Enemy, I got an additional 2 points for my Rangers doing it. And then I didn't get Scry Futures this time. So not great for secondaries, but not terrible either.
Alright, so we had an issue with camera again, like missed the recording. So here's basically what happened. A Land Raider tried to run, failed, spent a re-roll to make him run. He still rolled a 1. And so the Land Raider is just barely moving. Apart from that, Death Company Dreadnought moved up on the bottom. The Space Marine Assault Marines moved forward. After that, also as well, just to note, the Chaplain Terminator armor in the command phase tried to give him his personal buff. He failed. Gabriel Seth gave Chapter Master rerolls to the Devastator Marines. After that, what happened then, the Terminators and Gabriel Seth ran forward towards their main home objective. We're getting there. And then the Dreadnought came in. At the last second, the drop pod landed in, and the Death Company Dreadnought landed right there. And that is my movement phase. Alright, so for the shooting phase, it was not the best. So my Devastator Marines fired with their Chapter Master rerolls onto the Harlequins. Killed 3 of them, wounded the Sergeant with 1 wound. Because they don't have an armor save, so the grab guns don't have 2 damage. And then at the bottom, I'm rolling terrible with these single shot ones. The Death Company Dreadnought fired his split-fired his melta-gun into the vehicle and his flamers into the Rangers. And essentially, he whiffed completely against the Falcon. And against the Rangers, he did like 1 wound or so. Then the Space Marines fired, the Assault Marines shot all their guns at the Dire Avengers. One of them had an Inferno pistol, so he killed someone. And then they just killed a few after that. And then up top, the Death Company Dreadnought fired his melta-gun at the vehicle up top. It completely failed that as well. Fired his flamer into the Guardians, and I don't remember if they killed anything, but yeah. Then, at the very end, my drop pod fired his Stormbolter at the Rangers, killed 2 somehow. Then up top, the drop pod fired at the Harlequins and didn't do anything. And that was my shooting phase. Alright, for the charge phase, I started with the important ones. So at the bottom, the Space Marine Assault Marines charged the Dire Avengers, rolled a 4. That was enough. He did an Overwatch and got a bunch of 6s to hit, and he ended up killing, doing 3 wounds, so killed a guy and did a wound. Then my Death Company Dreadnought charged the Dire Avengers as well, and got in. And that was my charge phase. Oh wait, no. And then my Death Company Dreadnought up top, the orange one, charged his Guardians on the weapons platform that was just sticking out. And I was like, you know what, might as well try. And then I rolled a 12. So I got into his back line easy. Alright, so for the fight phase, my Assault Marines swung first. The regular guys swung, did 21 attacks, and slaughtered everyone but the Sergeant. Then my Sergeant and the other guy with the Eviscerator swung, and finished him off. I decided that in the end it was more beneficial to pile in with everyone than to not. So Space Marines piled in, tagged in his Falcon and his Visarch, and then the Death Company Dreadnought piled in, got in the Rangers, and is in with the Visarch. And maybe the Falcon, because of the way the hull is, I don't know. It probably is all three. And then my Death Company Dreadnought up top swung and just murdered a lot. I had to look up his rules, but he gets an extra attack on the turn he charges or heroically intervenes. And so he just absolutely slaughtered. And he had Blood Talents, which re-rolled to wound, but that never came up because he wounded everything. He's hitting on strength 10 right now, so that actually went better than I expected. The bottom is actually doing pretty well because his Visarch swung back on my Space Marines, killed only 2, and his Falcon whiffed. This is not the Eternal Crusade Falcon. Alright, so for the morale phase, he had to take some morale. Taking that drop pod causing casualties, so the Rangers failed their morale test because they only have leadership 7. He failed his attrition. The squad would have been gone, so he spent a reroll to try to survive him. He did. The Guardians up top needed a 1. Failed that. 1 ran, and he failed attrition, so another 1 left, so there's only 2 left. And honestly, what happened up top was really a big swing in my favor. I did not expect the Dreadnought to actually get into combat and do this well. And that was the morale phase. Alright, so for points, I controlled 1, controlled 2 at the beginning of my turn. Relentless Assault, I have a unit in their deployment zone more than they have one in mine. I have 3. Assassination, I have not done anything on that. Grind them down, we equally killed a unit each, so no grind them down this turn. Death and Zeal, I took the bottom right objective. I still have it at the end of my turn. One guy has his foot on it. And I did kill a unit that was on it. His Dire Avengers, or whatever those guys were on it. So I gained 3 points this turn. And that is my points. And so far, it's not looking good for me.
You guys, so for my movement phase, basically everything moved except my Guardians. So the Incarn went and moved onto this objective. Now, my Harlequins were on it, and they were troops. So I technically, and so by troops, their objective secured. So
It's
I actually can hold it. Huh?
You have to have OBSEC guys do it.
Yeah, so the Harlequins did it. The
Okay.
Harlequins are OBSEC as their troops.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Incarn just moved onto it because it has cover, essentially. And then Ivrain also moved up. She didn't run because I want to use some of her psychic abilities. But yes, and then my Void Weaver also moved this way. Basically just moving out of the way of the Terminators and the Dreadnought that has found its way all the way back there. The Warp Spiders have moved up to finish off that final Infiltrator and potentially the Land Raider. We'll see what happens there, though. My Howling Banshees popped out, and my Ranger left combat. Now, my Falcon stayed in literally just so it can shoot the Dreadnought. Because if it falls back, it won't be able to shoot. But none of its weapons are blast, so he'll be able to just shoot it in combat. And I don't really have to think too much about that. And that was my entire movement phase. Alright, you guys, so for my psychic phase, the Incarn did my secondary, one of my secondary objectives. And it was successful because it needs a 4. So I got 3 points on this objective. And then he cast, he cast the Ancestor's Grace, giving the Harlequins +1 to wound. Then Ivrain cast Word of the Phoenix, bringing back the rest of the Harlequin troops, so they're back to their full size. And then she did Gaze of Ynnari on Gabriel Seth, but she rolled kind of garbage on the how many wounds it would be, so he just took a single wound instead of a D3. And then my Farseer just smote the Devastators, doing 2 mortal wounds, and that was my psychic phase. Alright, you guys, so for shooting, a fair chunk of stuff had happened. So my warp spiders started by shooting at his land raider. And they brought it down to 1 wound, so they were able to do, I think it had 5. No, I had 4. So they were able to do 3 damage to it. And then my Farseer's Shuriken catapult shot at it, and I got I don't know what it was, like a 6 or something to wound, which gave it a higher AP, which was just enough for it to explode or to die. It didn't explode. And then my Harlequin shot at his Devastators, and they were able to take out 2 of them with their fusion pistols. Then my Void Weaver shot at his Terminators, and it did literally nothing. It was a pile of garbage. And then my Guardian shot at his Death Company Dreadnought. They also did absolutely nothing. And then my Falcon shot at his Death Company Dreadnought with a Bright Lance. I used one of my Fate dice to make the hit roll a 6. And then with the wound roll, I rolled a 6. It went straight through, and so I ended up doing 5 damage. But Dreadnoughts have the reduction, so it went to 4 damage. And then he tried to help it with his Feel No Pain, but that didn't help. So it's sitting there with 1 wound left, which is super annoying. And then I had the pulse lasers. They both missed the hit roll, so I used a command point, and then it missed again. So a lot of sadness there. And then I was like, okay, well, I have my Shuriken catapults, and those also did nothing. So the Dreadnought is alive with 1 wound, and that was the shooting phase. All right, you guys, so my charge phase. My Warp Spiders charged his Infiltrator Sergeant. Now, I only needed I needed a 3, and I rolled exactly a 3. And so they just barely got in. It was quite sad. And then my Harlequins charged his Devastators. And they rolled, actually, the guy can't be there because it's too close to the Dreadnought. They rolled 7 or something, and they got in just fine. And then my Farseer charged both the Devastators and the Drop Pod, because Witchblades can, do stuff to vehicles because they have a high strength. Or I guess they automatically wound on 2s. Same thing. And then my Howling Banshees charged into his Assault Marines, and that was the charge phase. Alright, you guys, so for the fight phase, I started with the Warp Spiders, and they pretty much failed me pretty hard. So his Infiltrator actually survived. They did not do what they needed to do. And then over with the Howling Banshees, which is actually where I started, they were actually able to take out most of the squad except for the last 2 guys. So they killed 7 or 8 guys probably. And then he interrupted there with his Dreadnought, and he killed the Vizark because the Vizark he didn't make his saves. Basically it. And then the Warp Spiders happened. Then I went to the Harlequins, who wiped out the 2 Devastators. They consolidated into the Drop Pod, and then my Farseer swung on the Drop Pod and didn't do anything. And then he swung back with his 2 Assault Marines and killed 2 Howling Banshees. And that was the fight phase. Alright, you guys, so starting off the turn, I started off with 2 primaries. So I was able to get 8 points there. I got the full 3 points for Death and Zeal, because not only did I take an objective from him, but I also killed a unit that was on an objective marker. And then with Wrath of Cain, not only did I kill his Land Raider with shooting, but I also killed his Devastators in melee. And so not only did I get 2 points, 1 for each of those, but then 2 additional points because both were done. I did not do Scout the Enemy this turn, so I got nothing there. And then I got Scry Futures for 3 points. So much better of a round for my secondaries. But now the game is starting to kind of close in, so we'll see what happens from here.
Alright, so for command phase, Chaplain did the buff on himself, the litany, I can't remember what it is, gives him +1 attack and strength, went off. The Canticles of Hate went off. And then Gabriel Seth gave Chapter Master rerolls to the Assault Terminators. And then my Death Company Dreadnought moved up, and that was it. Alright, so for the shooting phase, unfortunately we seem to be having consistent technical difficulties of it just not, recording not working. But basically, nothing happened in shooting. Everyone who could shoot in combat did. The only one who had successful shooting was the Death Company Dreadnought up top, where he just wiped out the last Guardians on the point, and I took it from him. Then the Death Company Dreadnought fired at the Falcon that was fighting the Falcon with his melta gun. He missed. I spent a command point to re-roll it. He missed, and that pretty much was it. And that was my shooting phase. Alright, so for the charge phase, Gabriel Seth charged the Harlequins, made it in on a 5. Terminators charged the Harlequins, made it in on a 6. Chaplain and Terminator Dreadnought charged the Falcon, made it in on a whatchamacallit. Failed it, but he gets free re-rolls, and he made the next one. I needed an 8. Alright, a technical difficulty seems to be keep happening. I don't know what's going on, but the footage for the fight phase is missing, but we can give the overview. So he has always fight first, so basically it's like I go, he goes with charges, and then he gets to go with all his guys at the end. So basically what happens is Assault Terminators swung first. They had like 29 attacks, re-rolling to hit because of the Chapter Master re-rolls, and they completely wipe out his, his Harlequin squad right in the middle. After that, then he goes with his Howling Banshees, who swing on my Space Marines, my jump pack guys, and they didn't do a single wound. That was pretty good. Then I had my Chaplain in Terminator Armor swing. So because of the buff he has, so his buff brings him up to 4 attacks. He charged, so first turn of combat, Space Marine stuff, and then his Flesh Terrors on Assault Doctrine give him an extra attack. So he was hitting with like 6 attacks, and so he hit on 2s. Because his buff also gives him +1 strength. Oh, and also 1 attack. So actually he was hitting with 7 attacks, I think. Yeah, something like that. Or 6 or 7 attacks. And then his Croesus Arcanum basically adds +2 strength. He has +1 strength, so he was hitting at strength 7. So he was matching the vehicle. And Flesh Terror's first turn that they swing, they get +1 to wound. So he was wounding it on 3s. And only one of them went through. And then he swung next with his Warp Spiders against my Infiltrators. And his Exarch whiffed entirely. His guys, punching and kicking, did only 3 wounds to me, which I saved 1, failed 2, but Helix Gauntlet allowed me to ignore the first one. So he took 1 wound, and he's still there holding that objective. Then I had my Gabriel Seth go, which basically was just him doing a pile-in because his enemy was gone. And then he had his his Falcon swing against my Death Company Dreadnought. He whiffed all his attacks. Then I had my Death Company Dreadnought wail on his Falcon and brought it down to 3 wounds left. Because he kept using those auto saves from his like Destiny dice or whatever. Then he had his Farseer swing on my Gabriel Seth. He did 4 wounds. I spent a CP to re-roll it because he failed 2. And he saved 1, so he's down to 3 wounds left. And then my Space Marine swung on his Howling Banshees, and they whiffed everything. That was terrible. And that was the fight phase. Sorry for missing it. Alright, so for points, I controlled 1, I controlled 2. Death and Zeal, I took his back objective, and I killed a unit on it, so I get 3 points for that. Relentless Assault I do not have, despite having a guy in his backyard. I have to have more in his back than he does in mine. And we're 1-to-1, he has those Warp Spiders. Assassination, I did not kill that Farseer. Grind them down, I killed 2 units, his Harlequins and his Guardians in the back, and he killed 2 of mine, my Devastator squad and the Land Raider. And yeah, so no grind it down, and so that's where the points stand.
Alright, you guys, so for movement, Ivrain and the Incarn made their way up towards the center to deal with all those guys there. My Farseer pulled back towards his home objective, which is now sitting on. My Ranger moved up 5 inches just in the woods, and then my Void Weaver moved along the far edge. Because his Dreadnought is not objective secured, he has to actually just stick back there, so he's kind of stuck, unless he wants to abandon the objective. But and so yeah, that was my movement phase. Alright, you guys, so the Psychic phase was rather depressing, but the Incarn used Storm of Whispers to try and do a bunch of group mortal wounds, but it ended up just doing one mortal wound to the drop pod, the Terminators, and Gabriel Seth. Then Ivrain used both Smite and Gaze of Yniad to kill Gabriel Seth. He was exploded. And that was it. My Farseer fell back, so she couldn't do anything. But yes.
That's it.
All right, you guys. So, shooting, I started with my Falcon because I was very curious to see what the heck was going to happen to it. So I shot its Bright Lance and it failed, and then I shot its Pulse Laser and it actually one shot went through. And so I used one of my Fate dice to make it auto wound. At its -3 or whatever it was, he needed a 6. He failed, so his Dreadnought died. Then I made my way down and over to my Ranger, who tried to shoot at his 2 wound left drop pod, and he did not. Unsurprising, but important to note. Then the Incarn shot, and he did a bubble, so he did 1 wound to the Assault Terminator, and I think he did a wound to the drop pod, or maybe nothing, I don't remember. No, he saved it, that's right. And then my Void Weaver shot at the drop pod, and it did 3 damage because only 1 wound went through. And then that was my Howling Banshee shot. I'm so sorry, guys. They did nothing though. So yeah, that was my shooting phase. All right, you guys. So for the charge phase, basically Ivrain and the Incarn just charged. They both got in, and we're hoping to kill a bunch of Terminators. Right, you guys. So for this fight phase, things actually did die. So the Warp Spiders finally
Never mind.
got 1 infiltrator after
I don't console.
52 turns. And then the Incarn took out 4 Terminators on his own because his main cleave attack ignores invulns and it's AP 4. So he really makes you work to live. And then Ivrain swung and she took out actually 3 because he had some crummy rolls. And so there's just 1 soul left with a single wound. And then the Banshees swung next, and they wiped out the Space Marines up there. But his Terminator swung in the only combat he had left, and wiped my Falcon, my poor Falcon. And that was the fight phase. Oh, and his Chaplain consolidated into my Banshees.
I changed that mine.
All right, you guys. So for this round, I only had 1 primary at the start. I did get the full 3 points for Death and Zeal because I finally killed his Infiltrator, and obviously took that objective. Wrath of Cain, I got the full 4 points for because my Falcon shot his Dreadnought to death. I killed the Infiltrator and his Terminators in melee, and then 2 points extra for doing that. But I didn't get Scout the Enemy or Scry Futures, so that is unfortunate.
Alright, so for the movement phase, I tried to see if I could move the Death Company Dreadnought into position where he could shoot at the Howling Banshees. I didn't, I couldn't, because all those things is like 12-inch range, so I just parked him in a safe spot. Chaplain moved on to the objective, and it's just sitting there, and that was my movement phase. Alright, so for shooting phase, the Chaplain Terminator Armor fired his combi Melta into the Howling Banshees. The bolters fired, did nothing. He saved it. And then the Melta fired and killed 1. Then I had the drop pod in the middle shoot at Ivrain, did some wounds, but apparently she has permanent transhuman. Then I had the drop pod on the bottom fire at his 1 ranger that's still alive hiding in the corner, and he failed it, but he spent a command point to re-roll it and did an auto roll to make it an auto pass. And that was my shooting phase. And for charges, the Chaplain charges the Howling Banshee squad. Alright, and for the fight phase, the Chaplain swings, and he has 6 attacks total with all his buffs going. 1 missed, but he gets a free reroll. Apparently he has -1 to hit against the Banshees, so it didn't really matter anything. I hit him on 3s because he has weapon skill 2. And then when it came to wounds, he failed to wound once because he's hitting with strength 7. He rerolled that wound and he hit them. And that was pretty much it. They failed. They had 4 invulnerable saves, or they had invulnerable saves, and they failed 4, and they all were wiped out. And that was the fight phase. All right. So for the turn, I controlled 1. I controlled 2 because my drop pod was in the middle, and my guy was all the way in the top right. Relentless Assault. He has 2 in my deployment. I have 1. Death and Zeal. My chaplain retook it. I lost 4 points, so I could gain 2. Assassination, didn't kill any. Grind them down, he killed 3 units, I killed 2. And this is where the points currently stand.
Alright, you guys, so for movement, my Void Weaver basically moved towards the bottom, and Ivrain and the Incarn moved closer up in the middle objective, basically to do some last-minute damage and death and destruction. And that was it. Alright, you guys, so for my psychic phase, Ivrain tried to smite the Dreadnought drop pod. She failed. She had a reroll because she can reroll her psychic abilities. She failed. So then I found out the Gaze of Ynnari doesn't require line of sight, or at least it doesn't mention it. It just says one enemy within 18 inches. So I did it on her chaplain, and as always, he took a single mortal wound. Then the Incarn tried to smite the same Dreadnought drop pod, and he actually did a single wound. And so that was an all-around depressing psychic phase. Alright, you guys, so for shooting, my Void Weaver shot at his, was it Dreadnought drop pod? Yes. Finishing it off, he rolled a 6 to wound, so on top of the flat 3 damage, he also would have done a D3 mortal wounds. So it was gone. Then the Incarn shot, and he did 2 damage to the drop pod in the center of the map, and then 4 damage to the Dreadnought drop pod. No, 3 damage to the Dreadnought drop pod just adjacent to him. And then my Ranger shot at his chaplain, but he missed, so it was just a whole lot of nothing there. And that was my shooting phase. Okay, guys, so for my charge phase, both the Incarn and Ivrain charged the drop pod with 2 wounds left, because I'm going to kill it and take this objective. So yeah, that was it. Alright, you guys, so for the fight phase, the Incarn just demolished the Dreadnought. Now, out of the 5 that hit, only 2 actually wounded, so that was kind of sad. But he only needed 1 to go through, which it did because it's AP4, and so it eviscerated the drop pod. Alright, you guys, so for this battle round, I had 2 primaries. So I got 8 points there. Death and Zeal, I got the full 3 points because I took an objective that I did not own, which was the middle, because of his drop pod. And my guys weren't actually on it. And then I destroyed an enemy unit on top of one. So the full 3 points there. Wrath of Cain, I also got the full 4 points because they destroyed a drop pod in melee. My victory point for blah, 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 blah. They shot the other drop pod and it died, and then I got 2 points for each of those, or for having both of those. Scout the enemy, my, whoever they are, web spiders, the warp spiders, did it, and because it was wholly within his deployment zone, that was 4 points, and then my Farseer got Scry Futures for another 3 points. And so that was actually a really good round for secondaries and points as a whole. And I think that gives me the win, but we'll see really quick.
Alright, we decided to call the game. The final point was 66-75. The Flesh Terrors could not come back. They only got Control 1, Control 2 at the end. They couldn't do anything. If none of the drop pods died, I might have been able to grind them down for that turn, but it still wouldn't have made it up. So in the end, Ynnari win from 75 to 68. Yeah, by 6 points. No, 7 points. So MVP, LVP for the for the Flesh Terrors. First off, Land Raider, LVP. Was supposed to be the transport to take my slow movement units into where they really need to. Immediately got hit first. Did terrible on saves. Only failed 2 saves, but took so much damage from it. Yeah. It was noticeably bad. So essentially what would have happened is those 5-up armor saves, which were buffs, would have turned to a 4-up if I still had Armor of Contempt. So this is without a doubt the one who performed the absolute worst. Only had like 2 kills to its name and failed in its most crucial job. MVP, Great honorable mention, the Infiltrator Sergeant who held my back line for like 2 whole combats.
Infiltrator.
Yeah.
I hate him so much.
Yeah, he actually got me a lot of victory points, so like I have to give it to him. However, the true winner will be the Dreadnoughts in general. So they killed 1 character, 3 points. They killed a squad and took a back objective, so that's 3 points for Death and Zeal, as well as help get grinded down once. And they did hold the objective, so that's like 8 points for the 2 some turns that they had it. So MVP, best performing unit, is my Death Company Dreadnoughts, surprisingly. Alright, so what's yours?
Well, I would say for me, my LVP is actually my Falcon. Now, let me kind of cap that by saying that I think most of my army actually did really well at what they were doing. But I think as far as the scale goes, Falcon probably did the least. When it got there, it kind of got tangled. Now, sure, user error, you could say. And that's honestly probably what it is. But, once it got tangled up, it really didn't do anything. It really, just by the skin of its teeth, killed 1 Dreadnought. And that was really it. So, and even still, it took it like 4 turns to do it. So I would say Falcon is probably on my LVP side, short up by the Warp Spiders, and actually I forgot about my Howling Banshees. The Warp Spiders and the Howling Banshees. The Warp Spiders, they did really good with their shooting, so they finished off the Land Raider, and they took out quite a few infiltrators. But in melee, and I know they're not technically melee units, but yeah, they really sucked there, and they sat there for like 2 or 3 turns with that stupid infiltrator. 1 infiltrator. And then the Howling Banshees, because when they did get in, the first turn they did great, but then after that they literally just kind of did nothing, and eventually lucked out in killing the last 2 guys. So anyway, but I would say Falcon's probably overall the LVP, but shortly followed by the Warp Spiders and the Howling Banshee. And there's probably some user error and a lot of bad rolls, but still. Now MVPs, I would say I think it's pretty close. The Farseer, he's here because he scored me a lot of points. He was objective secured, so any objective he sat on, he could probably take just by being objective secured. And then he also was able to fly around and get me my Psychic Secondary Scry Future. So he got me a lot of points, so that's pretty good. However, I would say the MVP is the Incarn. Not only because, so based off reading it, there's 2 ways he can teleport around. And it looks like he can actually do both. So if he's in reserves, he can show up when a unit dies, and then if he's on the battlefield, when another unit is destroyed, he can actually teleport over there. So it looks like he can do it twice. I didn't use him that way, but anyway, so he showed up, and then his thing to ignore invuln saves was massive, but he literally just cleared out wherever he was going. And he's a heavy-duty psyker, so I thought that was really cool. So yeah, I would say the Incarn was probably my MVP. Yeah. So what do you think about Flesh Terrors? Your first time playing them?
Well, so as for playing them, they're pretty good in melee. I just tried a different strategy with them. I tried the traditional Steel Rain that you hear of from like the stories and lore and stuff, but it was a mixed bag. How do I put it? In combat, they did pretty well when they were able to charge, and that's about it. However, it was really hard to get a grips on you guys. I had a few guys who did get into melee, and they did really, really good. Utterly obliterated Dire Avengers, did pretty good against the Banshees. That Chaplain with those buffs and stuff, he actually did really good. He destroyed that vehicle in the end. I mean, the Death Company Dreadnought held the line for the most time, but I didn't play them to their fullest, but when their stuff came in, they did pretty well, we'll say. But I got essentially outmaneuvered. I lost a little bit too many of my guys too early. Land Raider was hurt too early to properly deliver his payload. to the real things. If I would have gotten the first turn charges off Ynnari and stuff like that, it would have been a different game with like Gabriel Seth and all that stuff. So they're really powerful in melee. I can see that. But it's hard to see how they wouldn't be like similar to Black Templar, just a horde army of infantry, because that's where all their buffs lie. So a horde army of Black Templars, essentially, it's like another Black Templar. That's essentially what I'm saying. It's like they're similar to Black Templars, but more glass cannony. Essentially, that's what I feel. If you wanted to play them as meta as possible according to their book, that's what I feel. All right. So how was these guys?
Well, the Ynnari were actually very interesting. I actually like all of their characters. I know the Vizar kind of just took it to the face, and because I rolled really bad saves for him. But I actually like all three of their unique characters. I think the Incarn is amazing. Ynnari was kind of hit or miss for me. She's a psyker, so that's cool. She actually can do a good bit of damage. That's cool. But I think the Incarn is really cool. But what I think is interesting about them is that they actually can pull all three of the Eldari armies. So Drukhari, Harlequins, and Eldar, like the craft worlds. And I think that's pretty cool because it actually allows you to make a really, really custom list. Now, I'm not sure if I did it quite right. So from what I understand, that the Harlequins, because they're Harlequins, can still take and use their stratagems. But it does say that you can't use, like, you can't upgrade, like, their characters with, like, their unique stuff. So I think that kind of dissuades you from taking their characters. And then with Drukhari, you can't do those kind of upgrades either. And you can't take any of the homunculus units. So I think it's really interesting because it does allow you to kind of take bits and pieces from all three armies and use them. And so I had a relatively mobile army that could just kind of pop up and go around, and so that's why I was able to avoid your Terminators for almost the entire game. There were a couple of points where I had to kind of take stands, and that didn't go super great for me, but the rest of it, like, I was able to kind of pick off slower, smaller units. I think I actually played the Eldar closer to how they're supposed to be played, instead of all the other times I've played any of those three armies. And so I thought that was interesting. I actually really liked it. Yeah, it was definitely different.
Yeah. Well, that was an interesting game. If I would have gone... I never get to go first when I try Steel Rain. But if I would have gone first, it would have been very, very different. It would have been a completely different game. One more in favor of me, but... well. Alrighty then, well, GG's. I have no idea what's happening next week, but we'll see when it happens. So, like the video if you like the video, comment if you want to comment, share if you want to share it, and more to come.